Well, we'll start again. Welcome, everybody. We're starting on a better new leaf on this non-icy morning. It's great to have folks with us in person and remotely from all over the country. Given the challenging nature of the times, it's more than reassuring to have Denise with us to share with us some opportunities that we'll be having to, well, she's going to explain this, to join small groups, and to, if that's not possible, to at least buy the book and start practices that she'll be talking about. Thank you, Denise.
You're welcome. Thank you. Shall we have prayer? Did you already do prayer?
Sure. No, we haven't.
All right. Would you join me in prayer, please? Gracious and holy God, we are grateful for this morning and to be here to fellowship together and to learn how we can better be in your presence, to draw nearer to you in the days ahead. We thank you for this congregation that gathers together in order to support one another during times of joy and times of concerns and challenges. And so we ask that you be with those, not just in our congregation, but those throughout the United States who are being affected by changes in terms of job opportunities with the federal government, but other places as well that cause a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. And we ask that you be in those places where there is tension in the world. And we ask, we pray for our leaders, all of our government leaders, and prayers that they not be vested in their own self-interest and ambitions, but to consider the general welfare of those that they, of those who entrusted them to lean into a better place for them to be. All these things we ask in Christ's name, as we ask that you not just be with us, because we know that you're always with us, but that you open our hearts and minds and reveal to us what you would have us to receive today. All these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. All right. So nothing as exciting probably in some ways as Mary Magdalene this morning, but I'm happy to be here with you to talk about something that I'm finding very exciting, and that's the upcoming Lenten Small Groups. So I'll just, by way of history a little bit, this book that we'll be using, which is a different kind of fast, and it's by, I always want to, Christine Valters Paintner. And we used some of her things in our study of Sabbath, that she's a good writer. She's been in clergy and she's, I forget where she is in terms of ministry here right now, but she's been in terms of being able to talk clearly and plainly to people about our faith practices, and she really is a real good guide in terms of spirituality and learning how to be more contemplative, which is helpful in these days and times. So I think it was about maybe this time or even maybe a little bit after Easter. Her book just came out last year. And so maybe it was shortly after Easter that I came across it as I was looking for something else. And the minute I saw it, and because I was familiar with who she was, I was like, oh, order it right now. And I thought, yeah, this is what we want to do for Lent in 2025. So there have been some other suggestions, and those are worthy suggestions that we will continue to consider for other times. But I just felt like the Spirit really led me to this book, and in light of what's been going on in the world, in our country and in our congregation, that I think that this is going to be a real helpful book for us. I was at a conference this past week, Thursday and Friday, and we talked about fears. We talked about the fears that people have, you know, so whether, and they talk about it because its fears are generated by, you know, your cultural background. So what, you know, stories and just things that you have I want to say lobbed onto, but that you have taken to yourself as how your belief systems. And so you live by those, but then those are also then exacerbated by what is actually going on. They want the host spotlighted, so just, I don't want to join audio.
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Well, I had to let
You
it,
have to
I had to
do-
move it.
yeah.
Okay, all right. So paradigms, that was the word I was looking for just a second ago. So our own personal paradigms. But then there are things that go around us. So a lot of the times, you've heard the saying that just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get me, right? So people have those issues that they're dealing with, and they all hold true for us. So we have these fears and anxieties that are built up. And in the conference, what we were talking about, it's how can we then eliminate the fears. We know that they're always going to be present, but then how do we deal with them and address them so that they cause the least havoc in our lives, and that we stay grounded and centered. And so that's what I have always found important, is to stay as centered as I possibly can. And I think I've shared with you that, one of the practices that helped me get through seminary, I mean, I credit it for, I say dramatically, it saved my life that second year of seminary, was centering prayer. And it was a new practice that was introduced to me at that time. And I have continued to use it, for these several years since then. So this, before we get into actually the book, I was asked to just remind ourselves that in recognition of the 3 Abrahamic faith traditions that are actually in this building, that we recognize that there's just some overlap of celebration of significant holy days during this same period that we will be celebrating Lent. And the first one I want to talk about is Ramadan, because it helps us also in order to lean into and to appreciate those who are around us, is to know something about what they're doing. And we'd like for them to know something about what we're doing as far as our Lenten practices. So for our Muslim siblings, they will be going through Ramadan during this same time that we'll be going through Lent. They actually start Ramadan earlier than we begin our Lenten season. So, and it's contingent on the date, the exact date is contingent on the sighting of the moon, but it's expected to start somewhere around February the 28th, that's a Friday, and then it'll conclude on March the 30th. So a little bit before, 20 days before our Easter concludes, but then also starting a little bit before, just days before we start have our Ash Wednesday. And so theirs is a time of fasting, and it's about 30 days. And it commemorates the time that Muslims believe that Muhammad was given the first revelation of the Quran. And it's one of the 5 principles of Islam. So every adult Muslim who is has in puberty, past puberty, is expected to fulfill this duty, and they call it a duty. It's the duty of every male and female. And those who are excused are children who are below puberty, a person who is insane until they maybe regain their sanity, and then a sleeping person. So a sleeping person who is sleeping is excused from from the fasting until because they're actually fasting while they are sleeping, but until they wake up again. So that was what they talked about. Also, some exemptions include when you're traveling, and then if there's illness, and then women who are on their menstrual cycle or breastfeeding. But if you miss days, and the elderly also, but if you miss days for their fasting during Ramadan, you're expected to make them up. And their time is pre-dawn to sunset. So it's mandatory fasting for Muslims is during the month of Ramadan, and then there are also other times for atonement and then vows to Allah. So what they meant by that is that if you make a special request of Allah and pray to Allah, asking for a particular outcome or a particular thing, then and condition it. You're not really supposed to condition it, but you say that if I'm praying to you for this, and if you're favorable, I am going to now pray to fast for a certain number of days. So then you're obligated to go ahead and make the fast for those days that you say that you will. And other things that they do during Ramadan is that they're mindful of their praying. So there's prayers that they automatically have every day, 5 days a week. I'm sorry, 5 times a day, but there are also additional prayers and the reading of the Quran. And it's just like how we are in order to establish, to get closer to God and to their relationship with one another. So they talk about, so the piety, resilience, and the patience to encounter the temptations that they might have to break their fast. And then they feel that that because their whole community is fasting, so because it's obligatory or mandatory, the whole community is fasting so that they're in more spiritual alignment with one another. And so that seems like a really good thing, because you know that the whole community is practicing and supposedly then having the same spiritual aspirations. Now, the holy day that our Jewish siblings will be celebrating during this time is the Passover. And the only thing that I could find in terms of it being fasting, because this is a feast and it's basically the celebration or commemoration of the delivery, most of you know, the Exodus delivery from Egypt is the fast of the firstborn. And so that is in acknowledgement of, what was, the protection of the firstborn by putting blood on the post of the doors to save them. So the fast of the firstborn is done the day before Passover. And then they have temple days that are associated with this, as well as sacrifice, which is, and this was during temple days, but now in more modern times, they have the Seder meal, which then goes over the history of that whole experience. So that's not it's a feast, and it's not fasting in the same way that the Muslims and how we think of doing it. So the one that is more in kin or alignment with how we're thinking of fasting is Yom Kippur. And that's the evening of October, for this year, it would be the evening of October the 1st through October the next day, October the 2nd. And one thing, so it's really interesting that it took a little digging to really understand too, that they talk about it as being the Day of Atonement, and it's a celebration of, and it's the Jewish holiday. It's the holiest holiday or the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. And they fast and they pray and they seek forgiveness. And it's coming closer to God. And it's known as the peak high holiday. But of all the things that I was reading, it was like this last thing that I read that actually explained that it's the acknowledgement or the celebration of when Moses came down for the second time with, from Mount Sinai after being up there for 40 days. And so if you recall, Moses had been up there for 40 days on the mount to receive the 10 commandments, to receive the commandments from God. And there was fasting that was going on in relationship to that. And then when he came down, the Israelites were worshiping the golden calf. And so then God got angry with them again. Got angry with them. And this had been just a short time after they had, been in the desert. And so Moses went back up for 40 days and is said to have fasted during that time and to receive. So it was when he came down again that the receipt of that Yom Kippur actually celebrates that second time coming down, and that they had received the full forgiveness of God. And that was just, it was interesting to me because I didn't understand it that way. Now, maybe some of you understood it that way, but at any rate, that's what Yom Kippur is about. And like Shabbat, there's no work done on that day. And again, similar to the Muslims, where it's like from sundown to sunup. Well, theirs is from sunrise to sundown for the fasting for Ramadan. And then this is from the night before on through the next day. So it's very similar to that. And for Yom Kippur, it's dedicated to introspection and prayer and asking for God's forgiveness. And my understanding is that they are in church or temple that whole second day, that it's an all-day experience with them, that there are 5 services that they have during the day. and they recite these different prayers. There's no eating or drinking during that time. There's no wearing of leather shoes, which was interesting to me, and that had something to do with not having comfortableness. So leather shoes are a way of comfort, but it was also tied to the fact that it was animal skins, and so then it was tied to the covering of Adam and Eve during that time, but mostly now it's regarding the comfort that supposedly you get from shoes. There's no applying of lotions or creams, or washing or bathing, or engaging in conjugal relations. And that also applies to Muslims during Ramadan. So during the fasting period from sunup to sundown, there's no conjugal relations during that time. And yeah, it was interesting to find out the differences between their fasting experiences and what ours is. And similarly to the fact that they're based on certain things that happened in their tradition. One was Muhammad receiving the first revelation of the Quran. And for the Jewish people, then it was the forgiveness of God after the sinning that they did of worshiping the golden calf. So for us, our Lenten season, and it's different for, and I'm sure, well, it's different for different Christian traditions. So not all Christians practice or celebrate the Lenten season. So Roman Catholics do, Eastern Orthodox do, Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians, and the Anglican denominations all celebrate it. And Baptists traditionally have not. I think that more modern times that some of the churches, because they're independent, some of them are celebrating it, and Pentecostals as a general rule, and evangelicals and Latter-day Saints don't normally celebrate the Lenten season. And then for us, again, it's the significance of spiritual reflection and repentance. And we think about it as being a reflection of Jesus's life and ministry, but particularly his 40 days in the desert after his baptism. So just like the number 70 is having symbolic meaning for us during our anniversary time, this number 40 has a symbolic meaning several places in the Bible. And so we tie it oftentimes to the 40 days that Jesus was led to the desert in order to be tempted, and that he fasted during those 40 days. And then it's oftentimes associated with the 40 years that the Israelites were in the desert. And then now, because we're based on the Jewish tradition, that it's not just the fact that they were the 40 years in the desert, but then we can also acknowledge for ourselves that 40 days is tied to the forgiveness of God after the second giving of the commandments. And then there's other places in the Bible, and I'll just name a couple that come to mind. So I think about Esther in the Old Testament, and when she knew that the life of the Jews was being threatened, that she asked the Jews in the community to pray for her for 3 days, that they all pray together when she was going to see the king, because in that time that she was not allowed to go see the king unless he said that she could come see him, that she could lose her life if she did that. And then Elijah was also known to fast, and there are just other places in the Bible. It's actually fasting. Daniel fasted, when he was challenged about not eating. So there are 70 mentions in the Bible in terms of places to fast. There's no specific, like, you have to fast this way. There are different ways that have been, that people have fasted. No certain number of days that people have to fast. And also no specifics in terms of what you either eat or don't eat, except for certain occasions by certain people. Because we know that with Daniel, there was the Daniel fast that he did, and that was to say that we don't eat this food here, and that we'll be strong by using our particular diet. And so that's one example of that. And there's no mandatoriness to fast in the Bible. So So just like for the Jewish community, that all Jews are supposed to fast for the Day of Atonement. And for the Muslims, it's mandatory. And in fact, I used to fast with, but I have had my friend who is Jewish. When she would do the Day of Atonement, I used to fast with her. So then I read, well, but that's for the Muslims. So, but for the Muslims, they say that unless you're a Muslim, that God doesn't acknowledge or recognize your fasting. So I'm sorry, yeah, Hans just next. So anyway, you can add on. Okay. So, so what are some of the practices associated with Lent? You know, it started basically like 325, the 3rd century, which I guess would be anyway, 325, maybe it's 4th century. So that's when we began to see that there was this practice of the Lenten season or Lent. And it also was the same thing as other people have done. So it's to get closer to God. You know, some of the practices are reading the Bible, and especially prayer. So we don't pray necessarily 5 times a day, but the thought is that we spend more time in prayer during that time to get closer to God. And then some people commit to volunteer as a Lenten practice. And there are other things that people do in order to celebrate the Lenten season about giving up things. Now, one of the most well-known practices is the commitment to fast, and that's F-A-S-T. And just like in English, in other ways that we have words, and so because of my familiarity with fasting, and it's not because I don't know these other things, but that's how I normally think of it. You know, it's like the practice of fasting. But as I was looking at the dictionary last night, it was like, well, these other definitions, you know, so fast is an adjective to describe how quickly something is done, right? And then it's also to talk about, so fast is how describes something that's firmly fixed. So you think about roots being firmly fixed, like if you plant a tree, are the roots firmly fixed? And then if you're having drawers, you know, are they shut tight? So are they fast, you know, are they fastened properly? Yeah, so those are ways that we think about it. And then it's also to describe like a loyal friend, that you're firmly loyal. So Carol and I are fast friends, which means we're firmly loyal to one another. And then it could be talking about the time of a race, you know, so the speed of something. So, you know, they ran the race fast, or something that was acquired with little effort, you know, that he earned a fast buck. And that is kind of a shady, you know, it's not anything that we want to adhere to necessarily. And the other one that just always cracks me up, because I know the gender they usually are talking about this, that has to do it, is that if you're wild or promiscuous, you know, then somebody who is fast. And that's usually they're thinking about fast women, you know, so.
Or men.
Or men, well, but they don't call them fast. So the other thing is that like when you're sound asleep, you can be fast asleep. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about any of those, although I think that holding fast to something, so being firmly rooted, we fast in order to be we fast in order to be fast in Christ, you know, if we want to use it that way, which means firmly rooted. But anyway, so I that was just interesting to me. So the definition that we're talking about is to be firmly, to abstain from food for 40 days, or food or something else. And it could be like, you know, people usually give up a habit like smoking or swearing, or, you know, maybe you give up coffee or going to Starbucks. Usually I was giving up hot chocolate for those, you know, at Starbucks, because that's the only place I buy hot chocolate. So it's the idea of giving up something. And what I love about Paintner is that she is inviting us to what she calls a different kind of fast. So it's not this temporary fasting where we do it for 40 days and then we go back. So I'm real good for that 40 days. And sometimes I might even go, you know, another couple of weeks. but eventually I go get my hot chocolate from Starbucks and I go back to drinking it. So it's not to give up it's not a sense of deprivation. It's not to deprive ourselves, that she thinks of it more as, it's actually, it's an invitation to surrender those things in order to gain something else, which is a stronger spiritual relationship with God. And she invites us to release, kind of these old conceptions that we have of what fasting is. It's not a second chance to do your New Year's resolutions, so you didn't do your New Year's resolutions. Well, okay, well, I'll use Lent to restart that. So it's not that, but it's not, like I said, this mindset of deprivation. So it's an emptying in order to be filled. And it's that we receive this rich feast that is coming to us by the clearing of things that are separating us from having that close relationship that we desire to have with the divine or the beloved. And she says that that it's clearing out the clutter and pausing so that we can hear what she calls the whisper of the divine, because we can't hear it in all that noise that's going on. We have to quiet down and be still in order to hear, so we know that expression. And she talks about it in this way as a wilderness experience, and that it's but it's a wilderness experience that you don't have to go out to the desert in order to do it. So there are people who go on retreats and they go to these desert, or, they have a cabin or whatever, and they take the cluttered mind with them. So you can be in a very beautiful, quiet surrounding, but still have all this noise, the monkey mind going on. And by the same token, learning these practices will allow us, even in the midst of all that's going on around us right now, to center ourselves and to get grounded and to just have that calmness and the peace that that we're being invited to. And it's a lasting thing. So each week she invites us to a different type of fast. And so you could pull up the,
I didn't.
oh, is it me? I'm doing it. I think I'm doing it. Okay.
I mean,
all
I
right.
can try to.
No,
Yeah.
I'm doing it. Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
Well, I just didn't get.
No, I have it. I forgot that it was me. I forgot it was me. So are we? Yes. Oh, that's not the one I wanted. Because I know why, because I'm on that one. Just a second. So let me stop sharing here, go back to, let's see, window, this one here, table. Okay, I think I'm good. Share table. Yes, okay.
You got it.
So you look at the two things. One is the invitation to fast from, and then there's the invitation to embrace. And I tell people about a lot of things, but she does the same thing. It's not a demand. So I love the way she uses that. It's an invitation, that when you receive an invitation, you have the choice to say yes or no. And hopefully, you will accept the invitation, that you'll choose, but it's your choice. So it's the invitation to fast from in order to embrace something else that will fill you. And she talks about how we have all these, we're filling ourselves with junk. I mean, the media, cravings, hot chocolate, other, whatever else it is that we're doing. But it's not satisfying. Have you ever craved for something and you're walking around your house and you have this craving for something? And so it's not what you want, but you grab something else and you eat it, but you're not satisfied once you did that. And so the verse that she uses from Isaiah at the beginning of her book says, "Why spend your money for what is not bread, your wages for what fails to satisfy? Heed me, and you shall delight in rich fare. Come to me heedfully that you may have life." And so think about it in that way. I heard somebody talking about how like you've been out all day and you're in the back of the car, kids are in the back of the car and they're hungry and they're ready for dinner. And so, it's like, can we eat these potato chips? And parents either do one or two things. They either say, yes, you can eat them and ruin your dinner, or they say, no, I have this great dinner at home. And if you eat these crummy chips, then you're not going to enjoy the dinner. So this is like, don't eat the crummy chips. Let's kind of come here to wait for the good meal that we're having. So it begins the week for us. We're starting off that Sunday, which is the couple of days before Ash Wednesday. Ash Wednesday this year is March the 5th. And the reason that we're doing that is partly because the way we have it in order to get the 6 weeks in, because there's 6 lessons that we have in order to get them all in before Holy Week. Because otherwise, one of the groups or a couple of the groups would have to meet at a different time, or they'd miss out on that 6 weeks, or they'd have to double up. So the first invitation is Ash Wednesday, and it's to basically prepare you. So it's like when you get ready to go on a trip, right? You're going on a trip, you got to pack your clothes, you got to figure out what you need, all of those things. So she's this is a preview. This is pre-week 1, starting Ash Wednesday, is this fasting from consuming and kind of getting ready to prepare ourselves to enter into fasting, and then embracing simplicity. And it's asking us to look at what is it that is not just around us in terms of the clutter in our homes, but what is it that we're holding on to, so that, is there some food that you are willing to give up, or is there something else that is in your, surroundings that you are consuming, whether it's, a lot of media, a lot of screen time. There could be a number of things, but then to embrace this simplicity. And I know that when I went on the Camino, because we could only carry so much, right? So you were supposed to carry everything in one bag. And I found I could live I could live pretty well and I did for 35 days, with very, very little. And it has really helped me when I came back to kind of know that there are things that I don't need. So I brought stuff here from California that, again, during this time I'm going through. I saw last night, my crock pot was down here under the sink. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll hold on to it because I think, and it's like, Denise, you didn't use that crock pot in I don't know how long. So the only thing I might use it for, or is if I bake beans for a potluck or something like that. So that's the only reason I might hold on to it. But there are other things that I could let go of. I haven't used them, probably am not going to use them. Clothes that I could give away that somebody else could use, not because I'm just doing spring cleaning, but with the idea of being able to share those things. So those first days, then you are doing that from consuming to simplicity. Week 1 then is a fast from multitasking and inattention. So we know that our society is just driving us, that we're supposed to be productive and you do more than one thing at a time. And so you never give something else your full attention. And it's just, and people understand that, my mother, when I used to talk to my mom, because it was like easy to talk to her while I was washing dishes, at the end of the day. And finally, after years, it's like, well, Mom, how come you tell me how you really feel? How come you didn't tell me earlier? One day she asked me, she said, can I ever have a conversation with you where I don't hear water and pots and pans in the background? And I felt so bad, but I understand. And sometimes when I hear people with their pots and pans in the background, I say, oh, now I know how my mom felt. So to full presence to the moment. Week 2 is fasting from scarcity anxiety, which again, our society is just driven by that. All the things that are going on now about supposedly stripping away government spending. I mean, I understand if there's waste being done there, but some of it is people feel that if I give something to this group, then something's being taken away from me. So there's this scarcity anxiety that we have. We compete with one another. And so then this is to embrace this full radical trust and abundance that God provides. There's enough for everybody. I mean, we have there is enough. And so if we're not hoarding, if we're not storing up, that there's ways that we can share. And many of you who are school teachers know that story about how the soldier came and was going to make this this soup. You know, he was calling it stone soup. So he put this stone in the pot, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's going to be great. Sure would be nice if we had some carrots." And so people didn't trust him at first, right? So somebody ran off and got carrots. So pretty soon everybody in the village donated something to this soup, and everybody had soup, you know, whereas one might only have carrots and one might only have a potato or whatever. So this radical trust in abundance. Then week 3, it's speed and rushing. And that's how I feel like I'm doing now, but it's slowness and pausing. And one of the practices that she talks about in that is that just take a minute. Like if you're finishing, so when I finish here, I should really take a minute as I'm wrapping this up and just sort of, you know, just a minute, just a few seconds to close it and pause a minute before then I rush off, no, before I walk off to get ready for the service. So if we think about as we transition, if I'm working on something on the computer, you know, if I'm working on Lenten Small Groups, okay, well, when I finish with that, we'll just take a minute to just pause before I start working on something for adult ed or something like that. So slowness and pausing is something, I don't know if this is, all of us are looking at me like, okay. And then week 4 is holding it all together. And this was a really beautiful chapter. We have had a lot of grief in our congregation over this last 2 years. And just even if you haven't lost a loved one, just caregiving is very stressful. And we are very high achieving people who are used to being able to hold it together, being able to get everything done, you know, all of those things. And so God gives us grace, and there's no need to. And the other part of it is we don't let others help us. And so this one is allowing ourselves to accept the tenderness that comes to us and to be vulnerable. And to be able to share. I mean, you might not share with everyone, but even sometimes our spouses are very close friends. We're reluctant to share what's going on. And so we store up these tears and we store up the grief, and God didn't intend for us to hold grief forever. That the ability to process the grief doesn't mean that we've forgotten about our loved ones, but it allows us to be here. So that's about, again, the being here and the be now, to enjoy the joy that we have here, while still finding ways to honor and to remember those who are no longer with us. And so this is a really beautiful chapter. And one of the practices that she suggests in here is schedule. And somebody told me that this is what they do. And I was surprised to see that it was suggested in here. Schedule once a week, time to let out all your grief. And it doesn't mean that you're having loss over a loved one. Maybe you're grieving, you know, something else that you've lost. And so basically, or just, you don't even know where the grief is coming from, but to schedule once a week, even if it's only 15 minutes, okay? Every Wednesday, I'm going to allow myself time to grieve. And you sit, and if no grief comes, it doesn't. But oftentimes, if you allow yourself to let that come up and rise, it'll come up and rise, and you'll process it. So this is unfolding and ripening. Oh, I'm sorry, I moved from the holding it all together. Then in week 5, it's planning and deadlines. So again, this is people who have it all together, people, you know, multitasking. It's the planning and deadlines that we don't allow enough space in our lives. We're driven by time. We're driven by having things at a certain time, and it doesn't allow space. Although, you know, Stephen Covey says we should schedule, you know, some downtime. Bless you. So schedule some downtime, but usually somebody will say, well, I need to talk to you. And so then we'll put somebody else in that downtime that we scheduled for ourselves. So it's really important to allow the proper unfolding. And so, and it's not to say that you're going to become a deadbeat as far as getting things done. No, but you'll be really surprised at how when we schedule time to relax, time to be still, it actually gives us more energy. Now that's not why we're supposed to do it. We're supposed to do it because we want to hear that whispering, and it's a benefit. It's just a side benefit, but it gives us a lot of energy, and we're able to get things done, that we don't have to multitask and we don't have to crowd our calendars. So this was also a really good chapter. And then this, again, certainty, that we need to know how all outcomes are going to turn out, that we don't allow for the mystery and we don't have the patience to wait. And so it's really important that in terms of our faith journeys, that God lets us know what we're supposed to know when we're supposed to know it. And, I think I've shared that a lot of times where people used to ask me, so where are you going next, Denise? This is after graduation. I said, I don't know. God hadn't told me yet, but people want to know. And we sometimes have to be in the space in order to wait for the revelation of it. And again, this is nothing spooky about it. So, and the mystery. So we know that God is a mystery. So that all things aren't going to be revealed to us, so that we know the outcome at the outset, and that we have the patience to sit, and wait on the Lord, as the scripture tells us. And then after the 6 weeks and Ash Wednesday week of going through this, she's saying, then we live into the wisdom that we've gained during this time. And so we'd be really, I'm telling you, you'd be really surprised at the difference that it makes. And so part of it is that we have to commit ourselves, though, to follow through on it. And so just because in week 1, day 1, you don't feel like you're fully transformed, we have to be committed to leaning into it, because God makes changes, slowly. It doesn't necessarily happen like overnight. When you plant a seed, so there's a story in here that I think it's in here that they talk about that, or maybe it was somewhere else, but the part of it is that that somebody gave somebody a cup and said, you have to water this. You have to commit to watering it every day. And so the little girl watered it because her grandfather, because she loved her grandfather and she didn't want to disappoint her grandfather. But, after 2 or 3 weeks, and she was just watering this dirt in this cup. And so she wanted to not water it, but she kept on watering it because she promised. And then she gradually started seeing the shoots come up, little green. And then she got more excited about it. So she learned the lesson that sometimes, it takes time for things to mature. It takes time for things to ripen. And so we have to be patient. But it's not just for this 6 weeks. It's for us to live into it, even after this 6 weeks is over with. And so basically, the other thing is that, excuse me. Yeah. Don't do that, Denise. Okay, so that's the schedule of the practices. And with each day, so we have a book. She has an introduction, and she explains all that she's going to go through in the introduction. So the introduction is kind of long, but if you want to know, if you're the kind of person that wants to be told, and then they tell you what they're going to tell you, and then they tell you, and then they tell you what they told you, then read the introduction. But when I see I'm going over time again, I'm sorry. So basically, there's the rhythm of the week is that there's a reflection on the first day. There's a reflection, and then she has these 7 practices, 1 for each day. So there's Lectio Divina, which is holy reading of scripture, so a short passage of scripture. There's breath prayer, is the second one. There's Visio Divina, which she has a picture that she has you look at, and kind of go through the same process as Lectio Divina, except you're doing it with a picture. Then there's a meditation that's similar to like to the prayer. Oh shoot, I'll come back to it. But it's a prayer that we do every day that you do it. And then the contemplative walk. So again, so it's a walk that you could do. This is day 4. No, that's day 5. And then there's an imaginative prayer, which she gives you a scene, and then you pray through it, or you look at each of the characters and put yourself in it and just sort of sit with it. And then there's this creative ritual that, given what the what the thing is for the week, that you create a ritual that you come up with that you then honor. And then there's some reflection questions and a blessing. So the creative ritual, the reflection questions, and then there's a closing blessing are all on the 7th day. She's saying that this would take like 20 to 30 minutes. I know, because I'm talking longer, it seems like, oh my God, I don't have an hour, I don't have it up to it. But 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. And then you decide how much you can spend on it. So even if my suggestion is read the reflection. The other part of it is that there are 7 different spiritual practices. Again, it's an invitation. It's not a demand. Don't think, oh no, I don't want to start that because I just don't have time for that. But I just invite you, and if you're part of the small group, probably they'll do each one once. And then if that doesn't sit with you, then go back to something that you like, that works for you. Because basically, practice is we want you to practice. So if you don't want to practice this, then we want you to practice whatever it is that is working for you. So there's no failure. If you miss a day, start again. There's no competition. And the main thing is that it works if you make the commitment and then are patient to see what God does working through you by you showing up every day. So you're asked to look at what your intention is, what your heart's desire is, and that you're taking a journey through this wilderness of the heart for that 6 weeks. And I just really encourage you. So even if you can't sign up for a small group, to get the book and do it at your own pace or whatever. Because I really, it's just really powerful. I mean, and that's been my experience of all of the spiritual practices that we really commit to. Like when we did Sabbath, I mean, that was just like awesome. So that's it. I know. So 10 minutes.
So, so for those of you remote and or here in the room, if you have comments or questions, we invite you now to share. It does seem, I'll just say that this selection of at all times, we go through so much and have gone through so much, that this is sorely needed. And if we can just allow ourselves to do it, to look at some of these practices, but also to reach out and share with each other. If at all possible, join a small group. But if not, we're in touch with each other. And we're talking about, as a group, adult education seems to be strengthening and growing. And we're looking at new opportunities beyond just 915, although 915 is really important. But maybe that we can do more with each other to support each other during these times. So, does anybody in the group room or on, and I will just mention to all of you remotely, when you join us, if you can possibly, mute yourselves. I have muted you, but then you're welcome right now, if you have a comment to share, either in the chat, or you can share at this point over the waves. So, any. Han?
Yeah, I was gonna, in the meeting, I told everyone I was gonna share a little bit about sort of my experience growing up. I'm from Indonesia, and so it's a Muslim majority country. Just about everyone I know fast. And so during the month, restaurants and cafeterias would close during the day and they would open at night. And so, like, out of practicality reason, a lot of people, even when they're non-Muslims, they would also fast, because that's just the easiest thing. And it was always sort of like praised as the spiritual battle. And so towards the end of Ramadan, when people start celebrating Eid, preparing for Eid, they would, there a lot of like advertisement would be like, we did it, you know, it's a big, you know, we're victorious. So it's a lot of those like battle language, which, and that's how I first learned about fasting, not from Lent, but from Ramadan. But and then just one other thing is, early in grad school, so I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, you know, everything is you can watch stuff on YouTube or whatever. And there's this Indonesian Muslim scholar by the name of Shihab, and he was asked, what is the point of fasting? And he pretty much was like, it's not about the superficial stuff, who cares? God doesn't care about that. Again, and there are, you know, sort of like, think about like in the Jewish tradition, you have Talmudic and Midrash tradition, you have different teachers with different interpretation. And he said during fasting, and I wrote this in my seminar application as well, when you fast and they don't drink at all, right? Even a cup of water feels like the best meal out there, right? And all of a sudden, you know, you usually eat steak or whatever, but now all you want is a cup of water. And that should ground you, that you should be humble, and by, you know, like, and you should be in solidarity of those who are hungry, not out of choice, but because they can't afford things or they're food insecure or whatnot. And so I remember about that and Isaiah 58, right? So like how, if it's done right, then it should move folks towards working for justice and all that. So that's why I started fasting again for Lent and Ramadan since graduate school until now, because of that. And anyway, so that's just the, yeah, anyway, so that's what I'm, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks, yeah. Yeah, what you brought up reminded me of a conversation I had this week with, I have a good friend who grew up as one of 12 children in a remote village in Haiti, and she's now part of our community, but she was talking about the actions that have been taken and to deprive our aid throughout the world, as well as in our own communities. But anyway, she said, you know, Carol, if only these people who are making these decisions knew how important a clean glass of water had meant to me for much of my life, we wouldn't be taking these actions right now. So perhaps these practices can at least bring that home to us. Yeah, other comments?
Carol,
About-
it's Joni.
Yes, Jenny, yes.
It sounds like such a perfect study for people living in the Washington area. It is so refreshing to be out of that. We now live in Nebraska. It's lower. The people
Yes.
are a whole lot more open. I'm amazed at that in our community, how people just tell you so much more about their lives and share with you so much more. And I mean, it's just a whole simpler way of life. And, you know, I think coming from the Bethesda area, it's very startling. So, but I really look forward to this study. I think it's going to be great. Thank you for picking it out, Denise.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very much. Any other comments right now? Yes.
One thing comes to my mind about fasting is that we live in this area, in this country, really, of what I might think of as hyperabundance. You know, I think we're overly satisfied. And you go into I don't know, Walmart or the grocery store, sometimes it seems like there's too much stuff. So it would be, I think, a good reminder that what it's like not to have anything that you might immediately want at that time.
You know, we got COVID gave us a little example of that. Like when you go into the grocery store and, oh my God, they don't have my brand of X, you know, when we were used to 50 choices or whatever, and then there's only 4 and your one that you wanted wasn't there anymore. So we are very privileged in that way.
Well, and I think that if I'm getting the point of, you know, fasting, it's to get us away from the things of, you know, the immediate stuff in the world and help us focus on a higher plane.
Yeah, it's not deprivation. So we shouldn't think of it as we're depriving ourselves. But like Han said, and Joni, I mean, what you're saying is that most of the world doesn't have the abundance that we have. And so basically it puts us in equality for that month because we're living more in that frame of mind. And so the ideal would be then to carry some of those practices past the time of our fasting period. And it spiritually grounds us so that we have the fortitude and the discernment about what our real hungers are. So we're filling ourselves with all this other stuff because we're so spiritually just famished. And so, but we're not in touch with what it is that we really want or need. And so this taking a step back, pausing, slowing down, all of that sort of gives us the opportunity to get more in touch with that. And then to say, wow, I really do like that better, you know. And it's not perfect. We won't, you know, we slip sometimes, a lot of times. But because if you ever experience it, then you know what it feels like. So it's sort of like athletes that get in the Zen, like, you know, they're doing their training or they have a event and they have that Zen experience about what they're doing. And once you feel that, even if you backslide or, you know, get away from it or get over involved, you remember and you crave it. And so it's like the scripture about like the deer, you know, panting for water, you know, my soul pants for you, oh God. I just one more thing and then I'll go, is that if any of you, so there's still some openings for pretty much most of the sessions. So there's Sunday, 12 noon right after church. There's Sunday at 4 o'clock. There's, and that's Sunday at noon in person after church, Sunday at 4 o'clock on Zoom. Sunday at 7 o'clock on 7 or 7:30 on Zoom and in person, and then a Thursday class on Thursday night at 7. So there's still some openings. And if you are interested, just give me a quick email. And then the other thing, because Carol opened up about community, that if you aren't able to join a group, but you get the book and you want to have a conversation partner, please reach out to me. I love having conversation partners about some of this stuff. So just reach out and we can chat about it. I'd be happy to.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough, Denise,
No,
for
thank
your
you.
presence. What you do with us. And I will urge all of you who are with us today to continue to be with us. As the adult ed group plans, we have left a couple of Sundays to talk about what's happening around us. As soothing as that might not be, but next week we have a guest leader in our conversation who really had been leading the DEI training for many of the large organizations out in the world and here in the Washington area. Her name is Monique Bryant, and her group is called Challenging Racism. And she will be talking with us, leading a conversation now about what the impact of this can be, and helping us talk with each other about what we can do about that. So I urge you to join us. And then the following Sunday, we have Susan Andrews with us, our former pastor, who dearly beloved, who we just encourage you to see what Susan was like and how what a dynamic leader she was. And she's going to reflect on somewhat in our past and also look at what the future of the role of the church is. And then following that are 2 weeks with Denise Dabrowski Hopkins, world-renowned Old Testament theologian who will be helping us study and work with each other through Lamentations. So we keep coming, and we're looking at other ways that we can work with each other. The small group was continuing on aging, but we're looking at perhaps other times that we can get together socially as a group and to strengthen each other as the times continue to challenge us. But thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Denise.
Thank you.
Yeah.